Jesus, I crave to know you, just to know you will satisfy my soul.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. This is episode number 205. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me in these lessons in Luke. Today we are in chapter 10 of Luke. We'll be reading the story of Mary and Martha. I think there's a extremely important lesson for each one of us as believers to gather to conclude. And so we're going to read this portion, and I hope I do it justice. But I think it's important for us all to remember. So this is Luke chapter 10, starting in verse 38, and that'll be through verse 42. And it reads, "As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, 'Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me.' 'Martha, Martha,' the Lord answered, 'you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her.'" This is one that we hear fairly often. It's very illustrative, and I think it's definitely critical for us each as believers to consider, to remember, and to very much practice. And so we'll just kind of take our way through the text here. We are introduced to two women, Martha and Mary. And Jesus and his disciples came to this village where a woman named Martha opened her home to Jesus and his disciples. Then we find that her sister, named Mary, we find just very quickly that Mary sits at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But we find this very busy Martha, who, rightly so, is involved in being a good host. She has invited these people into her home, and now there is this great need to be a good host. She doesn't want to neglect them. She is trying to take care of all that's happening. Maybe there's other people helping. We do know that later on we find this is the Mary and Martha and whose brother is Lazarus. But Martha is very distracted by all these preparations that had to be made. Of course, through serving, no doubt, perhaps other things, but no doubt serving, because now she has a house full of people to host, to entertain. And she finds herself frustrated, and we all can relate to that. If you have a sibling that doesn't seem to pull their weight around the house, or family members, we often get frustrated the fastest at our family. We have, unfortunately, a shorter amount of grace for those that are closest to us in our lives. And that's unfortunate that that's the case. We often hurt the ones closest to us first, especially family. But she comes to Jesus and tells him, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." And Jesus gives a very direct and very pointed response. And he says her name twice. This is a very typical approach in the time to gather your attention. So it would almost be as though Jesus saying, pay attention, Martha. But the Lord answers, you're worried and upset about many things. Now, that's a loaded statement that we don't get a lot of clarity in. Could she have been specifically worried or upset about many of the things that involved this hosting of serving the people that she brought into her house? Sure. Maybe there's other things that she's worried and upset over. No doubt she could have had a difficult, challenging life full of obstacles just like you and I. And so that those other difficulties in her life could be contributing to the frustration that she feels here in the moment, just like you and I come across. And it's just like the one thing that kind of sets us over the edge in our frustration, our anger, resentment. And so it's almost like this domino effect. So we just kind of keep that in mind, but we don't have the details on it. We see it at face value. She's upset. She's worried. These are really classic issues that you and I face today. We're worried and we're upset. And unfortunately, it's become a rhythm of many of our lives. But notice Jesus' direction. But few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better. Some translations will say the better part, and it will not be taken away from her. And he's essentially saying, I'm not going to take that away from her. This is important for us to draw a conclusion from. There are good things that we do, which, just like Martha, there was good things she was doing. She was serving, she was hosting, she was fulfilling her obligations. And those are all good things. But Jesus points out there are good things, and then there are the most important thing. He says, there are few things are needed, but indeed only one. And Mary has chosen what is better. And what is that that's better? At his feet, listening to what he says. That's the posture that, as believers, as followers of Christ, we need to maintain over serving, over doing good things for God. We have to first and continually be in a posture of at his feet. And this is making time for him, making space for him, building in the relationship of intimacy and nearness to God. We can get so caught up in serving God that we completely lose connection to his feet and his voice. So I would challenge each one of us that hears this to evaluate, am I taking a posture of motion that has drawn me away from those components at his feet and hearing his voice? There's an element of obedience, of listening and hearing, and at his feet is this posture of worship. Those are two very important components, hearing him and worshiping him. And that can take different forms. Worshiping doesn't have to always be one particular component. And hearing his voice can be listening in stillness. It can be listening to his word, listening to him speak to you. There's different components to that, but those are two key elements: listening to his voice, hearing him, and at his feet, worshiping him. Those are two postures that we must always maintain. That doesn't mean that we'll never do anything for God because we are just in stillness all the time and doing nothing. But He will give us direction and leadership, and it's out of that posture that we are to do what we do for God. But we never leave that posture, and we maintain connection to it, just like we saw in previous stories where Jesus would remove himself from places and go pray. There's a revisiting of that place, just like in the Old Testament we see these like altars being built to the Lord, and it's kind of, there's this revisiting of that, a place of remembrance to God. So this is an important posture for us to remember, to maintain, to not get caught up in just serving God, but staying connected to the place of at His feet and hearing His voice. And that is the best part. It's from that place that we do anything of value, and that we do anything that remains, and it keeps us connected and healthy. It keeps our soul healthy. It keeps us nourished, and it allows us to be a better outlet for Him to work through. So keep that posture in always in the front of your mind. Evaluate how are you doing in that, and then make necessary adjustments as the Lord reveals to you those areas in your life that need to be tweaked or completely changed. So I pray that was helpful, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. God bless.
If it means that I'm close to you, I would trade 1,000,000 lifetimes for a moment here with you.